that they'd ever construct a store here. In the next slide, we'll show how we're creating lot 15A, B, and C from the target lot. The next slide is another important one. The hotel is 15C, just for future reference. We have to modify lot 13 as well because we add and subtract some land to both of those. This next slide is the aerial of Lockport Square, and as you may be aware, the eastern half of the rear of Lockport Square is basically already built. It had to be built for Target, and all curb cuts are in to the interior road. All parking islands are in place. The subgrade and even the base asphalt has been laid. Stormwater management system is installed, and utilities are already nearby. So one of the challenges we had for the site was really to try to utilize the existing infrastructure that's on the site. Fortunately, because it was going to be a parking lot, we don't have a lot of utilities under where we want to put the building. So we have a little bit of moving one of the water lines, and that's about it. But this, two other things in this slide. You probably remember, Kimberly mentioned the BMP islands. If you go out there, there are some large rectangles with green in them. BMP meaning Best Management Practice Islands. Those are where the parking lot drains into, and then that drains eastward. Along the east side of the site and the south side of the site is a swale system, which was really part of our Corps of Engineer permit for the site. And secondly, on this nice aerial that you can't see, there already is installed as part of the parking lot for Target and the next door parking lot, there's a north-south pedestrian sidewalk that's already there to the west of the hotel. And we're going to connect up to that and then connect that as a way to get north to the outlots in the front.
Where is this switch?
We're going to get on here soon, hopefully. Is that working? All right, well, this slide shows the existing curb cuts and how both hotel guest access as well as service access will serve the front and the back of the hotel, basically. So we come off the interior road and we're coming down a main road and then turning into the hotel site. All access from the hotel, because from your side, the far right-hand side is the east. The access to the hotel off 159th is here, so everybody's coming basically on the interior road eastward to the site, and they'll turn onto the site. I could do shadow puppets maybe too. And this purple oval on this sign that you can't see identifies the area which is off of our lot, which is really the access road. It's really caused by the fact that there are 3 curb cuts already, and the one west is the major access to our site. Provides a good direct access. Okay. And this slide highlights the pedestrian access. We essentially go west from the hotel to that north-south sidewalk that's already in place, pedestrian access, which will provide access north to the outlots, and then south, hopefully to the hotel, which we're planning behind the hotel, the theater, sorry, behind the hotel, and then the restaurant immediately to the west of the hotel. This is pretty cumbersome. Where are we? All right, this slide shows basically the parking lot has these BMP islands. There are like 16 of them all across, from the west to the east. And the ones in our area drain via underground pipe, take the stormwater from the parking lot, go through the BMP islands, which are essentially supposed to be a filtering system, and then drain eastward to this swale, which runs north-south to the east of ours, on the very east side of the site, and then the very south end of the site, all the way west over to the road on the far side. It actually doesn't drain into the pond there. And what we needed to do for our stormwater, long and short, is the hotel sits on where 2 of those BMP islands are already in place. So we've had to compensate for that by creating really, there's a small one to the north of the hotel, which collect the stormwater on the north side of the hotel. We've increased the size of the one that's existing to the left of the hotel, and we've created 2 smaller ones to the south of the hotel. Kimberly covered that in the notice there, but I want to point out, this was originally part of our Army Corps of Engineer permit, because there used to be an intermittent stream which flowed through this site before it was developed in 2007. And so we need to get Corps of Engineer approval for this, but we're simply having exactly the same system, but we're just moving the islands a little bit. This one shows our landscape plan, which is basically enhancing Target's existing parking lot plan and putting the landscaping around the hotel building as is required, as well as repopulating the new BMP islands with native plants. Close-up of the hotel shows the handicap parking in front of the hotel and in front by the porte cochere, the drive-through. The rear, as indicated, is an outdoor patio. Service areas to the rear, trash loading. And we've also got Lockport Square requires certain amenities for each property. We have a bench, waste disposal, bike racks. I suspect not too many visitors or guests are going to come by bike racks, but you never know. This is caught again. And then the elevations, which were described previously. And I just want to quickly go through those. And then I have some slides here I was hoping the Plan Commission could see, but I wanted to note, it's not part of this request, but the annexation agreement approved basically 3 tall pylon signs for what then was going to be retail center. There's one to the west, it's called Project Sign A. There's one in the middle access road, Project Sign B, and then there's a larger one over by the highway. Not surprisingly, the one on the left, far left, was going to have a big Home Depot sign on it, and the one on the far right was going to have a big Target sign on it. So we basically redesigned those signs for our new tenants, and Project Sign B and the highway sign will have the theater and the hotel signs on them, where Target used to be, because they kind of occupy the space the Target used to occupy. But that's, those were approved as part of the annexation agreement. And that's it. Since you can't see anything, I think we'll call it a day.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone have any comments? Questions, comments?
Do you anticipate having to have parking to accommodate trucks with trailers?
Trucks with trailers? No. The service for hotel will come early hours of the day, and then they'll be gone. So we don't expect trucks with trailers at the hotel.
Okay. Is that a question? Where's the theater going? Is it in lot 15 too?
It'll be on the back. At one of the site plans you couldn't see.
Well, we have a colored.
We got the plan.
Will be to the immediate south.
Did you have 15 A, B, and C?
Yes.
A would be the hotel. Would be, excuse me, the theater.
Gotcha. This is like C and B kind of.
Yeah, we're in C.
C.
And
Okay.
B would be a restaurant. That's our plan.
I have one other quick question. I don't know if it's appropriate, but do we, anything in the development agreement stop the city from implementing a hotel motel tax?
No, in fact, we talked that way, and the applicant, the hotel operator, may actually ask for one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, if I could insert a couple of comments here. There is an existing hotel motel tax that the city of Lockport implemented quite a few years ago. It's a 5% tax. We do have an incentive agreement that will be presented to the city council to rebate some of the hotel motel tax back to the developer to help defray infrastructure costs. But there is an existing hotel motel tax. There's an additional state tax of 6% that is not subject to the rebate agreement, though. So anyone staying at a hotel in Lockport would pay 11% tax, which is about the average amount. There are other communities that have a much higher tax. Bolingbrook and Joliet are substantially higher than what Lockport is.
Is there a set amount in the agreement, Mr.
Yes.
Dennis?
Yeah, there's a set amount, and it's a sliding scale, starting with the early years where there's 100% of a rebate, and then it slides down over a 20-year period. The city will start receiving, I believe it's after the 5th year, the city will start will be able to retain a portion of the sales tax or the hotel tax, and then by the time we hit year 20, 100% will stay with the city. If the city becomes home rule, the city will have the authority to increase the hotel motel tax, and any future increase would be retained by the city.
Thank you. Jim?
I'm good, thank you.
Any other comments?
I got a few things. Just briefly, let me go ahead. I concur with staff's recommendations on this, and I really have no questions. I'm quite satisfied with it.
Two questions. The development agreement was from '07. It's 10 years old. So in the last 10 years, I know there's been revisions to a lot of the city codes and standards. How is that usually handled? Is it, are they required to meet the latest or the ones in the agreement?
The ones in the agreement.
The ones in the agreement, no matter what.
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Thanis on that. He could.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the agreement would control over any changes that have been made since 2007, but I believe the plans that we've received are in compliance with our current code. I don't believe we're varying anything that has been approved since 2007.
There's a variance you're requesting for the height. Was there any attempt to keep it under the required ceiling? You're asking for an additional 3 feet in the height of the building?
No, in fact, we've been talking, again, trying to recover from no Home Depot, no Target, no junior anchors. The OEA agreement, which is the operating agreement, easement agreement for the property, the private covenants and on the existing property, talking with various parties, we've tried to increase that to 50 feet to allow them to go up and ask for variances. So as far as the development is concerned, we specifically allow 40 feet for hotel and, in the back 50 feet, and I think it's 28 feet in the front. But typically city requirements are narrower, they govern.
So your typical building is above what city code is, and it's like a rubber stamp size. That's the most efficient building you got.
It's hard to make a residential hotel lodging facility floor to floor as smaller floor to floors than most buildings, but it's hard to make this shorter.
So there was hardship for the variance, is all I'm asking.
Yeah, you can't.
That doesn't. We're not handling the variance here.
No.
Well, the variance is listed in the
variance.
staff report.
Well,
This is
it's just been
administrative
identified because we figured that the commission would question why a larger building or taller building was being considered. But through our zoning ordinance, the zoning administrator or city planner has the authority to deviate up to 20%. So this is less than 20%, so it just goes through a staff administrative process, not a formal hardship variance process.
Okay. And then the last thing, as part of the core and the Lockport permits, when the bioswales are looked at, they're very short and intermittent. Was there an operations and maintenance plan provided to the owner so they don't get out of control? Because small ones in parking lots usually are left alone, and the typical maintenance staffs don't know how to care for them.
I wish it was the city. It's the Corps of Engineers.
They can become an eyesore is what I'm getting at.
Well, no, the Corps of Engineers is controlling this, and we've spent probably $400,000 since we bought the property to all of the detention areas and these swales have certain native plants that need to be planted and managed. And when we bought the property, it hadn't been cared for like 6 or 7 years. So we've restarted the Corps' 7-year management process. So we're governed by the Corps here and have to do an annual report and so forth.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Nope, the only concern I had was what he just said about things getting out of control, and then they look like crap. When the prairie stuff and all the domestic stuff, that's real good to talk about, but I've been in situations where there's no management at all, and it looks horrible.
Even when it's managed, they're going to look like tall grasses. Yeah, they're going to be prairie grasses.
Okay, hearing no more response, do we have a motion?
Motion to concur with staff recommendations.
Second?
Motion second, roll call vote, please.
Ken Shepherd?
Yes.
Joe Maloney?
Yes?
Dave Oxley?
Yes.
Jim Malota?
Yes.
And Brendan Smith?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you much. Okay. Next up, we have Pro Lodges. Public hearing. Anyone who would like to speak about the Pro Lodges thing, please sign in. We've got
You got the
This is for the zoning, right? Zoning change?
007
Right,
comes
rezone.
up
Zoning
first.
case?
yes, it's a rezoning case. It's a public hearing. Anyone who would like to speak on these issues, would they please sign in with their name and address?
Sure, we need to sign minutes.
Not the presenter, no.
No, presenter does not, no. Okay, going on with
7 or 9? 7's a small.
We have two people here tonight that have registered to sign in. We'd like to have them stand and swear them in. Would you please stand, Ralph Mastalone? I don't want to. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Right. You and Mr. Howard Irving?
Mr. Chairman.
Did not? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we're talking about the rezoning case, not the Prologis, correct?
Right, the rezoning for a single family, yes.
Yeah.
It's a public hearing
And,
also, okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yes.
go ahead and ask you to kind of go through the process and procedure prior to having the hearing on both cases.
Okay. Here's the guidelines for the hearings before us tonight and any other night. The staff and the city will outline the applicant and staff's recommendation. Anyone who plans to testify in support or opposition of the petitioner's request will be administered an oath. The testimony you are presenting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The petitioner will have an opportunity to present any testimony, further evidence, and any other materials for his application. Anyone who will provide testimony in support or against the applicant will be allowed the opportunity to make his or her statements. Any questions should be directed to the petitioner or other witnesses. Do not direct questions to the commissioners or staff unless the questions are regarding the process of the hearing. This is not the opportunity to have a dialogue with the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Each case will be called one at a time, and after presentation, statements, and any questions will close the hearing for deliberation, and no public comments will be allowed after that. I would also ask everyone to please be respectful to each person who is speaking, keep a civil decorum by not interrupting, heckling, cheering, clapping, or disrupting the person speaking. With that, I would like everyone who is planning on testifying in the cases before the commission to stand and raise their right hand to be sworn. Sir?
We don't have to?
That's it? Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Let the record reflect that petitioners, witnesses, and public members who will be offering statements before the commission all have taken the oath to tell the truth. I will call the first case.
The next zoning case is case number 2017-007. The applicant and owner, Tom Small of Lockport Investments LLC, is requesting rezoning from R1 Single Family Residential and O2 General Office to R2 Single Family Residential for the property generally located west of I-355, north of 151st Street, and south of the creek. The subject property comprises of 29.22 acres. The purpose of the request is to designate land for future residential development. The R2 zoning district allows for one-family detached, one-family attached, such as townhomes, and two-family dwellings, such as a duplex. The applicant is also current owner of the vacant property to the north of the creek. During discussions of the proposed industrial park, he agreed to rezone the vacant land south of the creek to all residential. The rezoning only is being considered at this time. When a proposed project subdivision is formally presented to the city, it will follow the city's required development review processes. A rezoning of property requires a public hearing. Notification of public hearing is necessary and has been completed in 3 ways: newspaper and by city staff, mailings to property owners within 250 feet of the subject property via certified mail return receipt, and installation of a sign at 151st Street. Should the commission find the rezoning request acceptable, the following motion is suggested. A motion to approve the rezoning from R1 Single Family Residential and O2 General Office to R2 Single Family Residential. This concludes staff analysis. The applicant is here this evening to address questions.
Thank you. Applicant, please.
Good evening. My name is Mike Martin. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm at 15 West Jefferson, Joliet, Illinois. Just briefly, as was mentioned by Kimberly, when we were last here in February, we had promised to rezone this property to the R2 use, and we're following through on our promise. Just a little side note, of the 29 acres, we're donating 3.25 acres of the eastern portion to the city so it can expand its well site there. And also, as part of the other project that you'll hear tonight, the planned unit development, we're donating another a little more than 1.1 acres for the city to expand its well site at 146th Place. So beyond that, we're just following through on our promise that we would rezone this when Prologis came through with their planned development. Are there any questions?
Motion for public hearing. Okay, is there anyone from the public wish to speak on this matter?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just help clarify a little bit, because I think I see some confused faces.
Yes.
When this came before the commission and the city council previously, it was viewed as one project. Assuming this is approved by the city council in the future, and I'm not saying that they've said anything one way or the other, but if it is approved, there will be a part of this property that will be retained by Lockport Investments LLC, a part that's not being sold to Prologis. The portion that's being retained by Lockport Investments is the piece that has frontage on 151st Street, directly east of the Creekside subdivision. The commitment that the owners of the property made was to change the zoning on that property from industrial zoning to all residential. Part of that 151st Street parcel, and I believe it's about 29 acres?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Martin, yeah. So part of that 29 acres is still zoned industrial, going back to that legacy zoning that we talked about a few months ago. Yes. And part of it is already zoned residential. What's before you this evening is a request for a recommendation to eliminate the industrial zoning that's on that property, so it will all be residential. There are no development plans currently before you. The only thing that the councils or the commission's doing this evening is reviewing the request to change the zoning to R2, which is residential. If there's going to be a project on this property in the future, it would come back to you with detailed plans through the planned unit development process, or the PUD process, and at that point, residents will have an opportunity, nearby residents will have an opportunity to comment on the proposed plan. But it would strictly be a residential project and not an industrial project. I hope that clarifies and answers some of the questions that may have arisen while the presentation was being made.
Thank you. I believe it has. So, anyone have any comments or questions?
Anybody in the public? Nobody?
Public hearing? No one from the public? Would anyone from the public like to speak? Please come forward.
Come up and state your name
Up to the-
and your address for the record.
My name's Tracy King, and what you're talking about right there, basically, it's
Would
at
you state your address, please, for the record?
16451 West 147th Place in Lockport.
Okay.
I believe, if I understand this right, you're talking right on the corner of basically Gauger and 151st, pretty much where that, no?
You know where Creekside's at, Tracy? Your Creekside Estates?
Not exactly. I know there's a bunch of subdivisions
You know
right
the
there.
creek? Like with the Prologis development, that big creek on, everything south of that to 151st Street.
To
Not
150.
by you.
This parcel adjoins 151st Street, east of Farrell Road, on the north side.
You know where the fire station's at?
Yes,
They're right across the street.
Right
from
across the street.
that's
from the fire
what I'm talking about. That's what I'm, well, that is exactly where I'm talking about. And basically, it looks like that subdivision would have to be, somebody would have to want to move in there to live in the middle of an industrial park. Because that's all that's going to be around it, right? You're going to build another subdivision right on the edge of it, because you've already got one there.
We've got a subdivision there now, and just east of that, right across the street, on the north side of 151st Street, is this parcel, before the water tower. And it's west of 355. It's this side of 355. Where the water tower is, between the water tower
Right.
and those houses.
But this, you're saying there possibly would be another subdivision on that corner right
Well-
there. That's what it is, the corner of Gauger and
Tracy,
151st.
it's not Gauger. Gauger's on the other side of 355. This is on the
I mean,
west side.
100,
It's from the water tower is the farthest eastern point, so everything west of that to the existing residential subdivision.
East of Farrell.
Okay?
Good evening, everybody. Mike Bonomo. I'm at 16650 West Meadow Hill Lane. And one of the questions I want to pose when this is all, when this all gets, they're breaking ground and all, if a service road from the fire department is being discussed and or proposed, the reason why I asked it, first of all, obviously everyone knows we were all somewhat against this, but they're making changes, and thanks to Jim and his crew, I think they're listening. They were listening to our concerns, and hopefully doing the right thing to help the community around them, because of course they're going to be a neighbor, and we're going to have to work with them and not against them. I mean, they're going to be taxpayers just like us, and so we hope to benefit from them. My feeling is, and I think it should be strongly recommended, without a service road, if something were to happen in that development, I believe the fire department on 151st would be the ones to service building 2 or 1.
Mike, that's a different part, that's a complete different hearing. This is just with the rezoning.
I understand it,
property now.
but again,
That will
this-
come up in the next hearing
Yeah.
with the Prologis Industrial. This is just a rezoning
Right.
from industrial to residential, as the developer has agreed to do with the city and the homeowners.
I was going to plant a seed, because I think for a fire department to have access would make sense.
Well, and that'll come up in the
That's
next.
another discussion,
Right.
but something to think about. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this issue? Hearing none? Questions, comments, gentlemen?
I got it. Yeah, I just got one.
Comments, we know that.
I just had a couple, I got one or two questions real quick. The current market for residential zoning, is it skewing more toward R2 now than R1? More duplex and townhomes than single family?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the eventual end use, and that's a better market now than single family.
Town.
There is interest in that at the site.
And we hear over and over again, the last 3 or 4 meetings, that office is like a dinosaur now. Do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Office zoning, a lot of the office zoning in Lockport is disappearing and being replaced with M1 and other ones. So is that also the same thing here, where residential is replacing the office zoning because there's not a market for it in Lockport? Is that a common theme? Because we keep hearing it over and over again.
I can't really speak to the whole market for Lockport. This was something that the neighbors, particularly the Creekside residents, were more comfortable with this use as opposed to an office use. And we thought that as part of the whole package with Prologis, that it was a concession and it was something that we could market and sell as a R2 use. So we thought it was an easy concession to give to the homeowners because it's, more compatible with their use as residences.
Fine. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Now, I'm familiar with the history of this going way back that you mentioned there, and I concur with staff's recommendations. Making it R2, multi-use residential, future development, quite a few options for it, so I'm quite satisfied with it.
Okay.
And I was just to make a comment. R2 is, what you put in there. It's basically townhomes, duplexes, or single family. It could be any one of those two. So it's a nice buffer from that to the proposed Prologis development and the 355. I thank you, Mr. Martin, and your clients for listening to the residents, and I support this.
Thank you.
Anything? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the zoning to R2 for the
Second.
for the parcel.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Bellata, second by Perfilio. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
much.
There's Prologis documents on there if this doesn't work, so let's try this.
Yeah, but it won't be the same.
Does this look familiar?
Dude, we just go to presentation.
Up here?
The folder, yeah. Yeah. 11 to 9. Yeah, that's right. So go 2 more. That's the current site plan. So go back 1 where the yellow is there. Yeah, that's the current site plan.
Modern
Is
technology.
this okay for you?
Oh, yeah, just as long as the public
Technology at its best.
see something that's not.
Trees.
Thing don't work.
Call the case.
Okay. Okay, next up is the Prologis special use, case number 2017-009.
Thank you. Good evening. As the commission and the public recall, the concept plan for this proposed industrial business park was approved back in February 15th of this year. It was subject to several conditions, which were placed to address comments and concerns expressed by the residents of the neighboring subdivisions. The conditions have been included in either the development agreement, which is attached in your packets this evening, and/or addressed on the applicable preliminary plans, which we will review this evening. Jim McGill, on behalf of Prologis LP, is requesting approval of a special use permit for a planned industrial development, or as we've also called it, a planned unit development, approval of a preliminary development plan, as well as subdivision plat. A public hearing is required due to the special use for the PUD, And notification of this public hearing was necessary and had been completed in 3 different ways. A newspaper ad was placed by city staff. Mailings were sent to property owners within 250 feet of the subject property, and I believe some additional people may have also been contacted. And this was done by the applicant, as well as installation of signs at various locations, which was also completed by the applicant. The plan before you this evening is very similar to the concept plan in that it's an industrial park comprising approximately 200 acres. It includes 5 industrial buildings totaling approximately 1.9 million square feet. The property has a combination zoning of O2 General Office and M1 Limited Manufacturing. It is the intent of the developer to develop this property as a unified industrial business park. The park will be developed in 2 phases. You can refer to the development agreement that outlines specifically what will be done in each phase. Possibly 3 if Building 5 is separated from the second phase. As you may recall, and the applicant and developer have agreed to cooperate the city with marketing Building 5, Lot 5, which is located closest to Archer Avenue, for commercial and non-warehouse industrial users. The special use permit process is, again, intended for the planned development of the subject property because it is greater than 10 acres in size, and also because of the various conditions that were discussed at the concept plan level, and to incorporate those into a development agreement as well as the planned unit development. It's listed as a special use. It allows flexibility in design for the developer, but it also provides a tool for the city to be able to limit uses, enhance general design standards, and stipulate certain details and obligations necessary for the development of this property. Again, the development agreement is attached. It is a legal agreement and commitment between the developer and the city, and establishes various development parameters and obligations. The staff has reviewed the development agreement, various renditions, made recommended changes, and these changes have been agreed to and incorporated by the applicant. The site plan, which includes the 5 buildings, shows buildings 1, 2, and 3 still being oriented north-south, and buildings 4 and 5 oriented east-west. All buildings, loading areas, and trailer parking areas are separated from existing residential uses by either the proposed public roadway, proposed detention areas, and existing floodplain, or transitional yard buffers. These are ranging in size from 80 feet to 117 feet on the north, 223 feet on the west, and plus 200 feet on the south. The city's minimum requirement is 60. I've also provided in the report a site data table which kind of outlines the building sizes, landscape ratios, automobile parking required and provided, trailer parking, as well as dock doors. Based on the parking requirement, the staff recommends a 10% office ratio, but the applicant assumes a 3 to 5% office ratio based on his familiarity with the industrial market. I'll let him explain that more when he comes up and makes his presentation. There is also a proposed parking ratio that has been established in the development agreement. In some respects, it's a little more restrictive than city code, and in some respects, slightly less. But when you combine the type of uses, it kind of all balances itself out. The landscape ratio, as identified, the minimum they've chosen to go with of the 2 zoning districts, because one is 40% and the other is 35, is they've elected 35 as a standard throughout. All but building 1, which is at 33%, exceed 40%, which is also the other option. The new public roadway will have a right-of-way width of 80 feet, which complies with the city's industrial road standards. It will connect 143rd Street, which is under Will County jurisdiction, to Archer Avenue, which is IDOT jurisdiction. Permits from both of the agencies will be required prior to construction. A future signal is anticipated at 143rd Street with the future development of the property to the north. However, no signal is anticipated at Archer, and this is per various IDOT discussions. A traffic impact study, which has been prepared by KLOA, was submitted and reviewed by the city's development engineering consultant. Upon the conclusion of my discussion, Mr. Darnell with J.J. Bennis and Associates will provide an update of where we're at with respect to the review of that. 4 detention ponds have been identified and proposed throughout the development. There are extensive floodplain areas along the south property line. A stormwater management report prepared by Kimley Horn and Associates was submitted and reviewed by the city's development engineering consultant. There's also been discussion about the installation of public sidewalks and/or bike path. Typically, these items are required of all new development. Internally, staff has discussed the pros and cons of installing a bike path or sidewalk in this type of development. It is possible to install the public sidewalk in the right-of-way that's being proposed, and a bike path connection is possible within a north-south utility easement or along the west side of Detention Pond B. Because the exact location of a public sidewalk has not been identified or determined at this time, the applicant has agreed to provide a $50,000 cash contribution towards a future bike path. This obligation is included in the development agreement. The buildings proposed for this industrial business park will be similar to those that are constructed and being constructed in existing parks throughout Lockport. The applicant has submitted preliminary elevation plans. The plans are in compliance with the city's design and development guidelines. The elevation plans indicate that each building would have a primary color and 3 accent colors, and building in or color articulation is being used to break up the large expanse on the longer elevations. On buildings 2 and 3, staff requested and the applicant has complied with providing precast concrete screen walls, which will be installed on the north and south sides of the buildings to further screen the loading docks and trailer parking areas. The maximum building height in the O2 is 55 and in the M1 District 40. The applicant is requesting a building height of 45 feet, which would also include any parapet for buildings 1, 2, and 3, and a building height of 40 feet, including any parapet for buildings 4 and 5. Per the city's design guidelines, rooftop mechanical equipment needs to be integrated into the design of the building and shielded from view from the street and located as far as possible from adjacent residential. The elevation plans include and illustrate that an RTU screening wall will also be used to help further screen the rooftop mechanical equipment. Landscape and tree preservation. Landscape plans have been submitted during this preliminary review process. However, they only need to show general locations, types, and approximate sizes of plantings. Preliminary landscape plans have been provided for the transitional yard buffer areas, the detention ponds, the parkway along the proposed new roadway, and the loading docks and trailer storage areas of buildings 1 and 2 since they face I-355. Individual plans for each building have not been submitted at this time. They would include foundation plantings, interior parking lot, and perimeter parking lot plantings. The applicant acknowledges that all on-site landscaping will need to comply with city code. When they do submit for preliminary plans per individual buildings, those landscape plans will be part of that process and will be reviewed in detail. Transitional yard buffer areas do reflect the widths in excess of the city code's requirement and include not only the increased width, but also include berms, which are at plus or minus 12 feet along the north and plus or minus 15 feet along the west and south. Included is fencing, which would be 6-foot-high vinyl. It'll either be on the berm along the south or adjacent to the existing tree line along the north. In addition to berms, fence, and existing tree line, the applicant will also be installing at a ratio of 3 shade trees, 9 ornamental or evergreen trees, or 21 shrubs per 100 linear feet of transitional yard. Included in your report is a breakdown of the each buffer area, along with the shade tree requirement, ornamental requirement, shrub requirement, as well as what is being provided. The applicant has met or exceeded the requirements in all of those transitional buffer yard areas with respect to the plant material. At this time, a tree inventory only has been submitted. A tree preservation plan is not required until final development plan review. However, the inventory has indicated that a total of 1,468 trees, representing about 38 species, have been identified. There's a tree location exhibit, which also shows the approximate locations of all trees that have been tagged. That was included in your packet. The survey does indicate that a significant number of trees are considered in either fair or poor condition. Per the applicant, in addition to trees being removed to accommodate the development, trees will also be removed that pose a safety concern. The tree preservation plan that will be required at final development plan review will need to include a replacement schedule for all trees that will be removed, and replacement trees will be in addition to other required landscape plantings and will need to be identified on the final landscape plan as such. If at that time the additional trees cannot all be installed on the property, the city code does allow for the applicant to submit a cash contribution so that that money can be used to replace trees elsewhere in the city. Now I will defer to Jim Darnell with J.J. Bennis to provide a bit of an update on the reviews that were included in your packet, but prior to this report going out, we did not receive the additional items that were needed, but I will let him respond to those.
Thank you, Pam. In late July, we reviewed the preliminary engineering submittal for Prologis Park. We had several comments and prepared 3 review memos, which were then the city provided to the applicant. Late last week, revised preliminary engineering plans were submitted to the city. We have started our review of that. They're currently under review, but looking at them, it appears that all of our previous review comments regarding the plans have been addressed. The applicant's engineer has indicated that a revised traffic impact report and a revised stormwater management report will be delivered to the city soon. And so we're waiting to receive those, and we'll get those reviewed as quickly as we can. And but so far, it looks like all of our review comments have been addressed.
And then in addition, with respect to the fire districts, as also previously noted during concept plan discussion, this project is in 3 fire protection districts, Lockport Township, Homer Township, and Northwest Homer Township. None of the districts have had any additional comments at this time, other than if the previously discussed access issues with which have been addressed in the development agreement, and that pretty much stipulates that they need 2 access points into and out of the development while construction is going on as well as after it is completed, with the intent of the applicant to construct the proposed roadway that connects 143rd to Archer Avenue. It's a non-issue. That concludes my report. I can go ahead and note our suggested motions, or we can just wait till after the discussion and we can revisit
Let's wait till
that.
after discussion, please.
Okay, thank you.
Does the developer present wish to?
Yes, he is. The developer and his team is present.
Do they care to speak?
Thank you. I'm Jim McGill from Prologis. Most of you probably remember we've been here quite a bit. One thing I was just thinking about, we started this project, or we first time presented this was election night. And, the plan we brought in was, 2,096 square feet. And you look at where we are now is, 1,930,000, which, it's a 7% reduction. And all that reduction really came in through feedback through Plan Commission, discussions with the residents, discussions with Pam and her staff and Ben and Tom was really what we tried to do. The big things, what we tried to do is the people of Lockport Heights is where the road is. We looked at that as being the biggest impact. So we sacrificed FAR by increasing transitional yards as Pam, the road coming north-south, that transitional yard grew now to 223 feet, which again, code is 80 feet, which obviously you have the well there, so we had some natural impediment, but now we're at 223 feet. The homes that are located right where the road bends, those homes are actually located right on the property line versus as you go a little bit further west, they have their garages than the homes. So we were very cognizant or concerned about having the road that close to their actual homes. So we're at now 113 feet of a transitional yard. And then as we go down, I think the closest we ever get is 80 feet. But what we're doing, we did this exhibit. We try to make some of these things sort of just easier to read, and mainly because I have terrible eyes now, so it helps me read it. But what we did is where any place there was an existing tree line, we kept the existing trees. And then what we did in those areas, I think to maybe take one step back, is we looked at it twofold. One was just the transitional yard, when you're talking about sight lines and people seeing, trucks or seeing industrial buildings. The other side of that was noise. And Lockport's noise ordinance is 60 decibels at night, which is actually fairly high, or more than I'd see in other communities. So we took it upon ourselves to dramatically improve, or I guess reduce the decibel levels that they would have in this park. And there's actually something called the Illinois Pollution Control Board, which actually kind of sets guidelines, or it's actually a requirement of where your decibels are next to residential. Now, it's not really enforced by anybody in the state of Illinois, so I don't really know what the jurisdiction is between municipalities that have their own noise ordinances in the state. But the bottom line is we were trying to still get to the much more restrictive, which is 37 decibels, and I'll have a slide that shows that. So the only way we're going to accomplish that is through a more transitional yard. The more distance noise goes, it's obviously dissipates, and then also by having more areas for berming and fencing. So we did, again, going back to the trees, any place with existing tree line, we kept those trees, and then we're putting up a 6-foot solid fence, which will be a composite fence, and that was a concession we made with through the committee of the whole and the council. Is obviously it'll wear a lot better, and it's also much better for noise deflection. And then any place where there's open areas, and the open areas would show as on our drawing there as the brown. That's basically an area there's no trees in there. So what we did there is are indicated in there, they'll range anywhere from 15 feet to 12 feet. And then down at the south where the Wolf Ranch is, that's actually a 15-foot berm. And that one we actually have a 6-foot fence. So where we have berms, there is no fence on that. The berm basically provides the sound attenuation. But then we will have all the plantings in there on the top of the berm. So the big thing for us as we sat through these meetings is, we took it upon ourselves. The zoning was there, but it was very important for us to, in our mind, make some concessions to provide more buffering, more screening. We have to live with all these people when we're down here. So, and our users are very cognizant of issues they have with the residential community. So we were going, and I'll say beyond what we should. We just try to always do the right thing. So that's kind of the long and short of what we did. Again, reduction of FAR, much more berming, much more fencing, and then maybe just a couple of things quick here. As Pam mentioned, we obviously we're showing our detention ponds. All the stormwater will be treated through a biosol treatment. So before, some water will go into the pond, then most of the stuff will go into the bioswales, which then will be pre-treating the water before it goes in the pond. And the ponds have naturalized plantings, which also act as a pre-treatment. So we think what's being discharged into the creek there is fairly high quality of what we're doing, or at least on the water quality. So I'll go through, make sure, this here we don't need to go through. That just showed some of the distances. I did this more for the residents, the distances from their homes and from the property lines there, but we've kind of talked about that. This again is a typical, on where we're showing our, again, this is the berm. That's showing our landscaping on the berm, which we're meeting the requirements for a transitional yard, which is the 3 ornamental trees, the 9 evergreen trees, and 25 shrubs in the 100 feet. So just to put it in perspective, you guys don't care what we're spending, but between the berming, the landscaping we're doing, and this is landscaping just transitional yards and the right-of-way. This is not our building landscaping, and then fencing, we're spending over $1 million. So it's a significant amount of, one thing that it's going to look very nice once it's mature here. So this again, talking about the noise study, this was really important to us, and so we engaged a very reputable firm to do a noise study. And what this shows was our noise study without the barriers that we worked with them on. So you can see that the area we're trying to get to is the 38 to 43, or excuse me, the 33 to 38 is the number we're trying to hit. And you can see kind of the orange in some of the areas that we were exceeding that. If you go to this drawing here, this drawing shows that by doing our berms, by doing our fencing, that in every instance we're going to keep, based on their modeling, which is, they're an expert in that, is that the noise decibels for trucks idling will be, and that's the 37 decibels is the nighttime level. The daytime level is much higher, but it doesn't matter. Our berming and screening is there 24 hours a day. This is just something I think to see kind of how the park is going to look. I think it's going to be a very nice landscape, manicured, Class A industrial park. And this, just for, I guess, this is what Pam discussed. The yellow is our phase one, which will be basically the grading of those areas, getting the road built. The road's going to go all the way from 143rd to Archer, which will be the requirement for the fire department. And also, we thought it's a good idea to have it in there. And then the purple will be our phase two. And I guess I would say, you know, some of these phasings might be, if the market's not right, we don't live in a sequencing. If the market's soft, we don't build. If we build a building that sits vacant, we're not necessarily starting the next building, but that's kind of our best guess of what we'd like to do. And that's, Pam already discussed that. I guess I can address one thing in parking. You know, again, Prologis is the largest industrial owner in the world. So on these bigger buildings, the 700s and 400s, we would rarely see 10% office unless it's in e-commerce. And when you see with e-commerce, actually there's a group we're talking to right now, e-commerce would be, if they have that level of parking, they would actually then, they're usually just one-sided loading, so they would actually put their car parking inside of the, in the truck court areas. So meaning that I think our parking is more than sufficient for, I'd say, a typical distribution type user. So and if we had somebody needed excessive parking, they would wrap their parking into the truck court. So we'll kind of cross that bridge as we get users. But I think what's really important is, as Pam mentioned, you know, in every lot, the lot one is 33%, and you can see on these different ratios on our green space. You know, every other lot is well in excess of 40%, and what's our overall is 56% green space. So that's, you know, we're well over the 35%. So, and this one thing too is I know this came up with a plan commission, is some discussions on Archer Avenue. And this is what we have in front of IDOT right now. We have not got IDOT approval right now, and it's still, again, it's a schematic before we start our construction drawings, but we don't anticipate any issues there. But I think what's important there is you're seeing that we do some improvements that we're making on Archer is, I guess if you're coming southbound or you're going southwestbound, you know, there is going to be a full left turn lane into our project there, which we've actually, from kind of our recommendation, our consultant, we beef that up because we don't want any issues with any trucks that are queuing there, blocking traffic, so that was important to us. And as you know, right now, Archer right there is a 2-lane road, so if anybody, especially coming, when you're going northeastbound, if somebody was turning onto 147th, you're going to sit there behind them until they can make their turn. We're actually showing a left turn lane that will go into 147th. So I know there's not a lot of homes there right now, but at some point that might be developed or areas there. And so that just allows then anybody that's turning, that is going into that subdivision, then they'll have a dedicated turn lane, which allows people to go around them. So the one thing we mentioned too, which doesn't show up in the drawing, that I know that some of the children get picked up along this area there at 147th. So whatever we can do with the school district, if we need to increase a shoulder or something in there, so the trucks, the school buses can actually pull over and take that current issue off the table for them. And that's really it. The rest is just if I had questions in the appendix. So with that, I don't know, Pam, we could turn it over to the commissioners, or if it goes to the public hearing, or whatever you guys tell me to do.
Okay, thank you. We'll accept a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Maloney. Second by Perfino. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Please come forward.
Hi.
Hi,
My name
please
is
state
Cindy-
your name and address for the record.
Cindy Kuzma, 14663 South 135th. Could you go to the very first one, very first picture?
The site plan.
Yeah, the very first one that had some yellow. I wanted to ask a question on that. I just wondered, what are the yellow markings? Do you know what those are? That our house is actually the one in the corner.
The yellow.
Yeah, what is?
That was just telling the height of the berms there.
Oh, okay.
So you just highlighted so I can read it.
Oh, okay.
But so that's just telling that if your house is in front of those rounders, that's the berm. And that'll say the height of the berm.
Okay.
12 feet high.
Okay, all right. And and this may have been discussed at one of the meetings before, I'm not sure, and I know you've already got it planned, I just have a question, though. Did you ever think of moving the access road behind the buildings instead of in front of, and by all the properties of all the homes? Was it ever discussed to take that road and go on the other side of the buildings?
Yeah, but it was, why did this all be lost, just too much square footage there.
Okay.
And also where we have all the drainage, you can see Old Lake properties there, so the meander that around Old Lake property.
Okay.
It just became, you know.
No, okay.
Yes, you know, everything, but it just was,
Okay.
so it damaged so much of how we're laying out our buildings there, both cost-wise and
Okay.
anyway, so.
And I think you had said it once before, if not tonight, that you were not going to come into the property, like wherever the houses are and the property is, there's already trees back on some of the property. You're going to leave all that other than the dead trees that you're taking out?
Yeah, there could be some trees where the road goes that will go, so if there's trees where the road will be, those trees will be.
Okay.
And so the way to think about it is depending where you are, in most cases, you're going north south, that people that are facing towards the one, that's 223, because that doesn't have any trees in it. Yeah, except in the southern part of that, and then the other ones, the first 115 feet of the tree.
Okay. So the longest building, is that one? Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
How we doing? Aaron Hepner, 14545 South 135th Street. Two things. I don't remember discussion about lighting. My bedroom window faces that building one. I have a very stressful life. Sleep is important to me. Is the lighting going to be facing down or is it going to be facing out? Okay, okay. The other thing is, in my stressful life, I've dealt with over-the-road truckers. Lots of over-the-road truckers. Across the highway, they've got a pretty good security on who they let in and out. What's the plan here? I don't want people in my backyard.
We don't really have on-site, I guess, policing of our buildings.
Okay.
So that's usually handled by the individual company out there.
Okay.
So I can't tell you.
Is there any stress? Is there any recommendation on that, or I mean, is the city going to give the police a little bit more push towards that, or that'd be Will County District, wouldn't it?
Be city.
Okay. So, because I mean, I see Will County back there all the time. I don't see a lot of
Live in Will
Lockport
County.
officers.
This development will be in the city.
Okay. Okay. So will the city increase a presence around there, or?
I believe so. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't want to say increased presence.
I have a point for that that would answer it. In the original annexation agreements, the city can enter into a security agreement with the property owner to enforce the security if there's a need for it. So that's already in an existing agreement with the city.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks. Okay. And then last thing is they did a survey. I guess some people came back and looked at the water while I was at work, and one of my trees is magically dead right next to a fire hydrant. So some of the trees are being removed.
We can take a look at that. Wouldn't have been us, though.
Okay.
That's probably the city looking at.
Okay.
Water lines.
If I could also just add with respect to lighting, a photometric plan is not required at preliminary, but it is required at final development plan review, so that will be looked at the next stage. In addition to that, the city does require that all light fixtures be full cutoff, and that it's a 0-foot candle at property lines when adjacent to residential.
Thank you, Pam. Yes, sir.
Hello, Ed Bourne, 14663 South 136th Avenue. Right over there where it says 12-foot berm on the yellow there. I don't know if you noticed, but this spring we had a lot of rain, and I watched torrential rivers running between 136th and 135th. And if they're going to put a 12-foot berm there, that's a dam. And I don't know if you know it or not, but that building one sits in a 100-year floodplain. So I hope you guys really look at that water impact survey, because there's going to be problems.
They've had all their engineering done to that, sir, and
We can address it. That was brought up, I don't know if that was plan commission or planning committee, the whole talking about.
Maybe we'll-
Berms there, and obviously we can't, the water has to be able to continue its flow, so.
Say my name or anything, or, Jamie Putnam, oh, sorry.
I'm done.
Jamie Putnam, Kimley Horn, Associates, 281 Foster Drive, Oswego. So yeah, with the berms that are there, what is being done is we'll have storm sewer structures on the residential side of the berm to handle the flow coming through. There'll also be some gaps in the berm to allow the water to drain around the berm such that we are not impacting or retaining water behind the berm that'll impact the residential.
thank you. Just come forward.
My name's Tracy King, 16451 West 147th Place, Lockport. That one berm, it's directly in front of, you got the small one right there that's brown in front of building 2, and I guess that's 3. How far away is that berm going to be from the property line of the people that live on the other side of that berm? I mean, the street you said was 230-something feet or around that. You know, I may be off by a little bit. But where is the actual berm going to be? Is it going to be up closer to the street, or is it going to be closer to the residential property?
Christian Evangelista, Prologis, 1214 Fagan, Batavia. Regarding the berm starts immediately after the residential property line, but starts at a slope, a gentle slope, and then it goes up to the 12 feet, and then back down again. That's where we noticed that there was some water being retained on those south property lines near you. And that's where we went out there and added storm sewers in to help alleviate any of that problem in the future.
So the top of the berm is probably.
It's 40 feet out. Top, so it starts 12 feet over 40.
Behind me, so then you've got another 5 feet that you guys would have to give. So there's actually 10 that's easement, I guess. And then that's
Then it'll
pretty
start
much right there. It's going to start going up.
Ken Krupa, 14713 South Smith Road, the little property that jets down above Building 4. My question is, why are the berms shorter where we're closer? Like, I don't understand. We're actually higher than that building, so I think the base of our house is probably 10 feet higher than the current level. So this is not really showing elevation. It might be 12 feet tall, but why wouldn't you just make it 15 feet on both sides, just make it equal? It looks like there's more preference to the south of it, and that's actually farther away from most of the neighborhood. So why are they putting bigger berms where it's further away, especially when we just had this rezoning where there's not even houses there yet? Let those people make the choice to come live closer. Maybe we can push some of those buildings down, and then as the townhomes come in or whatever we develop that, let them deal with it, you know, because it's going to affect their property value right now. They can make that decision coming into it. So maybe that's something they can move a little bit south. There's already been a concession for 3 acres here and there. Maybe there's an acre or a 5-acre strip. They can move that down. Also on those berms, I don't think those tree lines are right. That 12-foot berm that runs across, when you hit our property and it's green there, yeah, there's trees there, but in the winter, for half the year, there's no foliage there. It's not that it's a huge, thick tree. That's probably the thickest chunk of trees right there. I just think you should berm it all the way across and make it uniform, because as they did mention with security, there's trees there. If it's just a little fence, it's a 5-foot fence, that's really easy for someone to hop over and run into the neighborhood in the backyard and hop back. At least if someone's got to run up a 15-foot berm, jump over a fence, you know, you're not going to keep that guy out no matter what. So I think for security, that would help. And again, the flooding, that might be an issue as long as they're putting that in, because that berm is a dam and it does flow southward toward that creek and down. So that's the only question I had. Why did they break it up? I get it that there's trees, but it's not a huge, thick mass of trees. And I think someone really needs to go take a look at that, because you're talking maybe like 4 or 5 trees wide. That's really not going to help that much with sound abatement, especially when we have the road on that side. So I think they should really do a little bit better job for the sound and just, you know, to keep it uniform on the north side of this development. And I don't know why, if anyone's actually been out there and looked, I don't think these are up to date as far as where the trees actually are. Because I can tell you right where our property ends, there's no trees south of that. It's all been cut down straight along our property line. So I'm just leaving that up to you. Has anyone really looked at that, or are there any pushback why that it's okay to have those breaks in that berm? Especially just given, you know, the trees.
Well, you can answer the berm height.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why why are we doing 12 up there when the houses are higher and 15 lower? I mean, so that 15 feet's actually higher because they're sitting below. It would make sense the other flip-flop it.
We're gonna look at that, if we can squeeze a couple more feet right, and to your point, where it wraps around your property to the west side, and the trees are thinned out there, and there's nothing, we don't feel
Right.
like you do that it's not covering it, and we could look at wrapping the berm around.
I mean, I'm just saying because it's thinned out a little bit there, but I mean, you're just going down to a 5-foot fence. You know, you've got this big monstrosity, and then it's going to come down. Yeah, I mean, you know, just. No, I'm not saying that. I just think that.
We could squeeze a few more feet on that one, and then to the west of your property, we'll look to see if wrapping the berm around.
Yeah, I mean, because we're right in it. I mean.
Well, we also have, you know, we have a detailed tree survey, so we can take the tree survey.
All right.
Like in that area, that a lot of the trees were deep or Huawei.
Yeah.
We might say,
Yeah,
we
so-
might say, let's get rid of those trees because we're not providing anything. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just.
have a study of that.
And then, you know, there's other people on the other side of our property that's just gonna help a little bit more with the sound, you know, if it's a fence and some more dirt. Looks like you guys are gonna dig a lot of dirt up there, so hopefully you should be able to make a nice berm all the way across. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Howard Irving, 17306 West 145th Street, Lockport. You did bring up the stuff about the entrance or the emergency egress at 104 Archer and 147th Street. Now, is that going to be restricted to cars only and emergency vehicles, or semis going to be coming in and out of that entrance?
The new road that's being built to Archer Avenue, that would be no restriction on that. That's full access.
So the semis will be coming in and out of there as well, is what you're saying?
Yeah, most of our traffic, most of the semi-traffic would be coming down 143rd.
So that would be causing a little bit of a hassle, won't it, when these big semis are pulling out of that thing to get out on the Archer? Going north and south there, that's gonna be like a major traffic jam, whether there's a center lane or not.
The traffic's gonna be, I mean, my opinion is that the flow for trucks is much easier out to 143rd. So, like all of us, if they go out to Archer and they can't make their right, they're gonna, eventually the next time they're gonna go back around 43rd. So they're gonna go where it's easy for them to get out there, so no restriction on that.
So that's how many, about 600 trucks a day, you're saying? We're gonna have, what, a third of them gonna be taking that exit entrance?
That's probably not far off the trucks, yeah. It's 300 and 300 out, so.
So that's pretty dangerous. Major traffic hazard right there.
That's his opinion. Is that?
That's his opinion.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, one more here.
Justin Schmidt, 511 Thornton Street. I think a lot of these improvements are
Excuse me.
Yes.
Would you repeat your address, please, sir?
511 Thornton Street.
511 Thornton Street?
Yes.
Okay. so-
I'm not involved in direct community of this, but it's
Okay.
going to impact my daily driving to and from
Okay.
work, so.
Okay, 'cause, yeah.
And I'm just looking out for the residents too, because personally, I don't know if it's a right fit. But the improvements are terrific. I think going on that Archer Avenue discussion, I thought in February's discussion that was not going to be a main truck route. So I guess I'm kind of confused in how that changed. I thought the main trucks are going to take 355, so they're not going to be following down Archer. But now if we're gonna put all this improvements in to put a middle turn lane on there, I feel like now we're inviting the semi-trucks to take Archer. And I don't know if Archer, what the zoning on Archer is at that point.
State road.
It's state road?
Archer is Route 171, it's a state route.
Okay.
The city can't restrict trucks from using it.
Okay, because I know since that drives right into downtown Lockport, I didn't know how that affects everything since the speed's about 50 miles per hour, I think, right in that area.
40.
And 45. And if semis are coming out onto that speed, that road at that speed, it's gonna kind of impact traffic quite a bit. And that's kind of my concern with the Archer Avenue. So I don't know if that can be addressed at some way, because I thought February we said we weren't gonna have that as a main truck route. So some way to kind of restrict that. Now, based on your conversation about your first phase versus your second phase, I mean, obviously all the first phase stuff is gonna be more directed on the side of 355. So it may not be an immediate issue. But on that subject also, I was reading some articles that certain industrial parks and warehouse demand has slowly dropped because of how many warehouses have been being built and industrial parks are being built. And you said you don't know what the market's going to be in the future. So if, for say, you build some of these buildings and then say, hey, the market doesn't condone any more of these buildings, how does that land get handled? Does it just sit there vacant? Does maintenance get done on it? Does it get greened over? Like, I just don't know how that is taken care of. No, I never figured you'd rezone it, but just like weeds just growing and flooding areas or water retention, anything like that. Okay, so that's never going to be, at that point, you're not leveling that area. Okay, I misunderstood that in the original purple yellow. Okay. Okay, I was just curious about that. And then for the roadway that's going in, is any of that still going to be city property where city has to maintain it, city has to take care of lawn, anything like that? So I didn't know where that, yeah, so where is that line of, you know, you guys are putting all these trees and putting tons of money on landscaping. Where's that line of how it impacts the city and how much more maintenance the city's going to have to take care of versus what you guys are taking? Like, where's that line?
Well, the main road that connects 143rd to Archer will become a public roadway, which will be just like any public roadway. The city will plow it, fix it if it gets, you know. However, the parkways with the parkway trees, just like in, you know, throughout town, it's typically the property owner's responsibility to cut the grass and keep the trees in good condition. If the trees die, obviously you could work with the city on a 50-50 share program to replace the trees, but it would be a city road eventually once it's completed and the city accepts it.
Okay, yeah, I was just kind of curious where that division was of which who's responsible for what landscaping, who's responsible for what road condition. Actually, obviously parking lots are still going to be your responsibility, but transition to the road, I just didn't know for sure where that was going to be at. And the one, I know this isn't, you know, to a T the exact drawing, but I did notice on some of your spots where you're going to put the berms and the tree lines, those lines are drawn over some people's properties, kind of like you see the edge of a building and the line goes through. And it just opened up the question of when you go to do this work of like building the berms and stuff, are you actually going to have to enter anyone's private property while you're doing that work? You're going to put the silt screens up and everything, make sure nothing roads away, heavy rains, anything like that? Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Anyone else from public wish to speak? Hearing none, have a motion to close the public hearing.
Public hearing.
Motion by Maloney. Second by Trevino. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Brent, any questions?
Can I ask two things? When you guys are gonna do the prairie seed mix, the wet mesic seed mix, the bioswale, do you usually enter into a contract with a native contractor for the first 3 to 5 years to manage that for you?
Christian, you wanna-
Yes, we do.
Okay, because we've had that in the Park District before, where we had a contractor, and after 3 years, it still looked horrible, and we actually removed him because he wasn't doing the management program that he had said he was gonna do.
We're required to do it for the Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay,
3, 5, 7 years.
okay,
NCAP, right?
okay. Can I ask you, I've got one other thing I want to ask you. I was looking at your plan on the berm, and I like there's a lot of plants there. But them berms are going to be pretty high, and usually the high berms are pretty dry. And just consider, there's a couple of plants on there that are not dry plants. Swamp white oak is not a dry plant. And the swamp white oak, the reason I understand why it's a good plant to use, because it's very cost efficient to grow in the nursery, and it's also very easily transplanted. So that's one. Some of the maples that are on those berms are require a lot of moisture. And the reason I'm asking you guys is if we're gonna have plants on those high berms, the survival rate of those trees are really important if you're gonna use that for viewing and to block viewing and that. So I'm just asking that you would consider looking at a couple of those maples, the swamp white oak. The linden is one other one. Not only does it like moisture, but the Japanese beetles love it. And at this time of year right now, a lot of them are defoliated because of that. It's popcorn to the Japanese beetles. So I like what you've got on the berm, but in an effort to make sure we have a high survival rate, what's on that high berm, and that berm is going to be dry. So, and there's other things you can use. There's a lot of other oaks. They may be a little bit more expensive, but like I said, good reason why somebody would use the swamp white oak. It's very cost efficient to grow and very easy to transplant. So, you know, just to give you an example, we had a tree at the plant on our sports complex. We couldn't get rid of the water. It was a wet hole all the time. We threw swamp white oak in there. It's doing beautiful.
Okay.
So just something to consider, guys, okay? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I knew that was coming.
I wanted to piggyback on the one gentleman's comments on the berms on the north side. Generally speaking, you're putting a lot of stock in the existing tree lines for screening. And he brought up a good point. In the wintertime, there's no screening. If they're, I don't know if it's called deciduous, is the ones with leaves. If it's primarily deciduous trees, you're looking through a bunch of trunks, and that's it. And there's not much of a value for the tree lines in the Midwest. You know, 5 months out of the year, there's no foliage. So what are you going to do to address that problem? I guess that's one of my questions. I know it might be cost prohibitive to you to extend the berms, but what, in your opinion, could be done? Maybe supplement the tree lines with evergreen type, I don't know what you call that, trees to take care of the sight lines when there's no foliage, but what's your take on that?
I mean, I would say, just, and Christian, you hop in, is, you know, it's hard without looking at the full tree survey. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to tear out nice existing trees than to put berms in and plant new trees on it. But I'm sure there's areas, if we think it's sparse, that, and again, you sound like you obviously know a lot more than about landscaping, where can you plant some evergreen trees in there to break that up? Now, we do have
Supplement it.
Supplement, yeah. Now, we do have a fence, but the fence is
Dead
5 foot
trees are
tall,
being
so that's not providing a lot. Excuse me? Sorry.
Dead trees have been tagged, they're gonna be taken out. And in place of the dead trees, you're gonna put new ones. Maybe in place of the dead ones, you can put evergreen type trees to fill in the gaps, so in the wintertime, it's, you know, just suggestion is all I had.
No, I agree with that. We're happy to go back and look at, go ahead.
We'll take a look at that. It may be more valuable for those type of trees closer to the residence property line instead of on the south side of the existing tree line, between the property line and where that tree line starts. And that's something we can definitely take a look at doing.
Sight lines are pretty important to everybody.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, we can definitely take a look at that and see how that can be adjusted. I know the trees lose their foliage in the winter. There's some areas that are still pretty dense, and we'll have to go out there and walk it pretty much to see how we can modify, adjust, and find something that's a happy medium.
I mean, one thing, if you think about it, the whole north side is you've already got, well, we have a big berm there that runs between building one. We've got, you know, 50% is berms on the south anyway. So we're not talking about, Christian, a huge area that we could make improvements. So we'll definitely look at that.
And also on the north side, there's no fencing at all. On the south side, there's fencing. There's fencing. There, it's not labeled on here.
It's fencing on every place there's an existing tree line, we're providing the 6-foot composite fence.
Yeah, I don't see it on this one. Okay.
It's on landscape plan, yeah.
So it was just omitted unintentionally from this.
So if you go, I can.
Okay, so it just wasn't labeled, all right. Okay.
Our screens are not working.
Their screens are blank.
So we're blank here.
Hey, Brett, there is a couple of oaks, guys, and I can't remember right now, but there's a couple of them do not lose their leaves in the winter. There are a couple of oaks that do not lose leaves until spring.
Tell them that.
Well, that's what I'm telling them. Just check them out.
Landscape guy.
Oh, Jesus. I wanted to talk quickly about few other things too. This is a draft. The development agreement is a draft. There were some revisions made to it. The date on it says 8/3, so I don't know if that's been agreed to, all the conditions in it.
Well, I would say the one thing that's still not complete, not necessarily agreed to, we just haven't drafted it yet, is the upgrade of the 12-inch water line to the 16-inch and where that's going to. So we have an exhibit that, so I don't think there's any disagreement, at least I'm aware of, between.
I wanted to actually, there was a few, on the public improvements, section 4, page 8. The first question, why wouldn't the entire 16-inch main be reimbursed by the contractor or by the owner instead of just the difference between a 12 and a 16? Are we further extending that line to the east? Is that why they're only paying for the difference?
I think if I understand the question correctly, excuse me, the developer will be required to pay at the developer's expense to install a 12-inch water main. The city would like to see a 16-inch water main. So what we're doing is the city will reimburse the developer for the additional cost of using a 16-inch pipe.
Okay.
So developer pays the 12-inch main. We will have whatever the percentage is. We'll get hard numbers on that and just do a direct reimbursement for that. It's for the benefit of our system.
I understand. And then under roadway improvements, we talked a lot about Archer, and it's under IDOT's purview, of course. And if you look at a regional map, if truckers don't take 355, Archer feeds everything from the west, everything from the northeast. And to me, Archer Avenue is the capacity of the 2-lane there and the queues at the intersections is going to be a disaster. And there was a statement made that IDOT didn't think there was a signal required at 143rd and Archer?
No, there is Archer. At 147th.
147th, yeah, or our new.
There's a signal on 143rd and Archer?
Yep.
I didn't see that on here.
You're looking, Brent, this comes out of
But there's no improvements there though, right? There's no.
There's improvements, but right now IDOT hasn't mandated a signal yet. It's under review, right?
But there's no improvements that you're going to make at that intersection is what I'm getting at.
At 147th or 143rd?
143rd and Archer.
No, that's a fully improved intersection already.
What do you mean they have nothing to do with it? All the trucks that are coming down into the subdivision.
Here's where they're coming in. You're 3 miles away.
Oh, yeah, okay. From the northeast, trucks come from the northeast, right? And they go through that intersection, right?
Well, not if they get off of 355, they're just going to come down the frontage road into.
So truckers from the northeast are going to are going to fight through to get to the interchange on 355 instead of just taking Archer.
I mean, when they, wait,
I
think if they're coming, well, I think if they're coming from the north, they're going to get off at the Archer 143rd exit and then just continue down the frontage road to 143rd, not go to Archer all the way down. I mean, I guess if you were in building 5 or building 4, maybe you'd say it's better for me to go that, but.
What I'm getting at is trying to restrict the trucks on Archer Avenue because that's a bus route with a lot of kids on it.
We have nothing to do with it.
But we can't do that though, it's
Okay, well, you're.
So what I'm getting to is I'm getting back to the public improvements section And it said that you're going to do all improvements on Archer as required by IDOT. So is there a phase one study that they're doing right now on Archer Avenue that's gonna dictate that? Or is that something the city has to coordinate with IDOT, or how does that work?
Our requirements for IDOT is going to be provide the left turn lane into our property. We'll have accelerations lane and de-acceleration lanes, and the left turn going into 147th there. IDOT's not requiring us to widen Archer Avenue to 143rd.
So the traffic study went to
The traffic
IDOT.
study, yeah,
IDOT is reviewing the traffic study, and whatever they recommend from the traffic
Correct.
study is gonna be part of this agreement.
That's correct, right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
And the traffic study was not provided to us. I would have liked to have seen it, but evidently, from what I heard, it's under revision.
We're not the engineers here.
Well, just wait. I'm an engineer, so I'd like to look at it.
but you
I
can't
would have
bring
liked to
that
have
here.
looked at it, but there's revisions to the traffic study. And what are some of those revisions? Were there things that were the trip generation sources off, or was there something that they did incorrectly? I'd like to know.
Only revision on the traffic study was, I think they moved up the completion of the apartments on the Marsh property that's going to be developed. So I think they had that as a later date. So now they moved it up to the 2021 timeframe of when the improvements would be done there. And that's got to be reflected in the traffic counts.
So the traffic study drives all the roadway improvements that are going to be made on 143rd and Archer is what I'm getting at.
Right.
So that traffic study is important is what I'm getting at. And it has not been approved yet by the city, right? There's still revisions going on with it? Am I correct saying that? Okay. So when it is finalized, any recommendations then they're made by the county or IDOT will be your responsibility?
Right.
Correct? Okay, I just wanted to reinforce that. That's a big item. And as far as the intersections go with signals, I would imagine once you get to closer to full build-out, the truck traffic will trigger intersections to be improved with signals at those two locations.
Yeah, it's going to be based upon IDOT warrants, so yeah.
Okay.
So it's also other background traffic too, besides our traffic.
Okay, okay. Just want to make sure that that's all taken care of. That's a big item. Let's see what else I had. After Planning Commission, there's a number of items that have been addressed evidently for the Venice memos. All of them have been taken care of before it goes to the City Council. I know in the past we got to keep things tight on this level. We got to make sure that the comments are taken care of. So the only comments that are left to be addressed are the traffic study, and that's it, correct? All the other memos, they've addressed the engineering and the erosion control and the wetlands and things like that.
The stormwater management report is still being revised too, and needs to be resubmitted.
But they're on track to address all of them?
Yes.
Which is good. So just the traffic study is the only open end? Okay.
Yeah, they'll need to do that prior to the committee of the whole meeting.
Okay. And then there's a variance on the building height.
Well,
40 feet is the standard, and they're going to 45, is that correct?
Well, in the M's, or the O2 zoning, it's 50. So
55.
55. So actually, our buildings 1 and 2 would be under the current height, and building 3 would be, that would be in the M1 zoning, which is what,
It
Pam,
says
40?
buildings 1, 2, and 3, you're requesting a building height of 45 feet.
Correct.
Which is 5 feet over the requirement.
But it's only 5 on,
That's
it's
okay
over
with-
on building 3 only.
And that's okay with staff, right?
Well, it's not, again, it's not a variance per se based on hardship. It's a deviation from the code, and that will be handled through the planned unit development or planned industrial development and the development agreement.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Bill?
Yes, first off, I'd like to say I very much appreciate all of the revisions Prologis has made since this was initially proposed to us late last year. You've been quite responsive to the concerns brought up by the citizens, the residents, the adjacent property owners, and that's very much appreciated. I realize it's reducing your square footage and increasing your expense, and you're still willing to go forward with it, so that's greatly appreciated. On the development agreement, I take exception to condition number 7 on page 5. Second paragraph states that the idling of trucks shall be prohibited within the first northerly and southerly 100 feet of the western truck court of Building 2 on Lot 2 and then Building 3 on Lot 3. That's simply inadequate. That provision needs to apply to the entire business park.
That there's no idling of trucks through the entire business park?
There shouldn't be any idling of trucks for any extended amounts of time anywhere. And not only is that inadequate, it's also invalid. Pass this over to staff. Council, pass this over to Jim. Pass it over to. Public Act, Illinois 0940-845 prohibits diesel vehicles of more than 8,000 pounds from idling for more than 10 minutes per hour when they're parked, and it applies to Will County. You know, so the thing is, give that to Jim there.
Yeah.
I have another copy here if you want, or give this to Pam. Yeah, so the thing is, paragraph 7 on the conditions need to be revised to incorporate the requirements of the state law. As written, it's not only inadequate, it's invalid because state law comes first. And the thing is, state law gives the local police department authority to enforce, but what we're really looking for from Prologis and your tenants is voluntary compliance.
Well, I would say though is, and I have a different thing that says within the state, within Will County and the state of Illinois, and this is very common in most colder communities, that you are allowed to idle for up to 30 minutes per hour if the temperature is below 32 degrees. So if a trucker's waiting to get to a truck spot and it's not a dock position, it's not open, he's not going to shut his truck off and sit there and freeze for an hour. He's just not. So that also is a state of Illinois code. This might be correct. It isn't there. Yeah. So it also we're not on site, so we can't enforce if they are idling of trucks. We're not there. We don't have on-site management. We're not there to enforce.
I understand that.
And these aren't our employees, so.
What I'm saying was you don't sit down to negotiate a lease with the prospective tenants. This is on the table. They agree, and you post this around the whole business park. State law requires you can't idle your trucks. And I realize a lot of these truck drivers may not be employees of your tenants, but your tenants are paying the freight bills. And your tenants can make it clear to the carriers they're expected to be in compliance voluntarily with the applicable state law.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump
Sure.
in for a second. Subsection 7 was not intended to preempt the state law. It was actually intended to make the idling more restrictive. And what Prologis has proposed is taking certain areas that are closer to the residential areas and prohibiting idling across the board at all times. Otherwise, outside of those specific areas, the state law will prevail. So this is not a section that attempted to circumvent or preempt state law. Prologis understands in all of its business parks in the Chicagoland area, including this one, they have to comply with the state law as on idling. What we've done, though, is gone a little bit more restrictive and prohibited idling in certain parts of the park that are closer to the residential areas. So you make a good point, making sure that this is brought to their attention. They understand that. So whatever the state law is, that will apply. This agreement does not change state law, but it makes state law, makes the local rules more restrictive than what the state law actually is.
Understood. I would like to see this public act incorporated into paragraph 7, if we can do that, just so there's absolutely no misunderstanding as to what's allowed. And I would also like to see this posted throughout the whole business park. In fact, I'd like to see it in every business park in town. When it comes to truck idling, first off, this came out about back in 2006. It was common practice for an over-the-road trucker to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning and sit there until 8 o'clock when the place opened up, idling all half the night. This is an era of precision trucking to where everybody knows exactly where they're going to be when within a matter of less than an hour. And the other thing, most modern trucks have a pony engine. The thing is, they got an auxiliary engine they run to keep the thing warm without having to run the prime mover. You know, so the need within the trucking industry to idle extended period of times has been drastically reduced since 2006 when this first was enacted. Still, it's still enforced. It still needs to be complied with.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Jim? Sure, just a few comments. A lot of history here. Thank you guys I agree with some of the comments up here. The work you've done, the staff, city leadership, and you guys as developers to come up with a plan, you definitely listen to the neighbors, and development agreement, I was very pleased reading it. So I think every condition, I came up, you know, back in January with about 17 conditions that they're all but 2, in my opinion, have been addressed, which I'm very pleased with that. And I thank you. I think my neighbors thank you. The people to Lockport Heights, thank you. I mean, you've changed, added berming, you added heights, you added the landscape plan came out. You can really see your building heights. You reduced those a little bit. Your size you reduced a little bit. And the building heights are important for some of us because the elevation changes too. But I really appreciate that. You know, I was never a fan of the development just because it's between residential communities. Granted, there's, you know, we live on 355. I wanted I-55. With that comes transportation businesses too. But I always thought if it was done correctly to protect the residents around there, this could be a nice fit. And you know what? I think you guys have done a great job and have come a long way to make that happen. From a personal perspective, I'd much rather something like this that's developed correctly and with the proper screening to protect the residents. I'd much rather see this than 1,000, 1,500 homes that have all the other impacts that come with it. You know, from what I've probably said back in January to these statements today, I think you've definitely made a huge impact on the way I look at this project. Couple little things I'd like to maybe bring up is looking at, and I know we talked about this in January, that extending that berm a little bit to maybe just to even the tree line, not all of south of Building 3. Because it looks like there's a tree line right there. I wouldn't want you to take any of that down, but if this, Jim, if this makes sense over here. I don't know if you could see this, Jim, here or not. Hey, Jim?
Yeah, sorry.
I just think, oops, that light works. It's right in here. Just because the elevation changes from this corner houses and the R2 that's going to go in there, not only is the building height.
So basically saying wrap it around?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, at least cut this corner. I wouldn't expect you to start cutting into this tree line.
Isn't that where is that where the sanitary line is? I mean, I guess I'll ask engineering. And, you know, maybe a 15-foot might not work, but maybe we can increase that to a 10 or something like that, if you guys could look at that. Yeah, we'll look at that. I think we tried to avoid it because it's where the sanitary line is. So, I mean, if the city will let us put the berm on the, you know, a lot of times they don't like to have that because then they'll be like, if we have to go in and work on it, we're paying a lot more money for it. But I think that's a city request, I guess, engineering.
And if we can't do that, maybe there's other ways to do it.
We can do it if they let us put it on it, right? Yeah.
Additional trees or something like that, or some pines.
We can work, make that more radius and extend that over.
Yeah, we could probably.
We could probably squeeze a few more feet over there.
Okay. And I know you're going to look at the bermage to the north, Lockport Heights. So maybe if you could check that out too as well. And
I'm sorry to get in.
I know you're going to look at the other berming to the north, so maybe if you look
yep.
at that would be very helpful. Some things I really liked about the development agreement is I guess it would be probably considered a dormant SSA. Address a lot of concerns of residents. Hey, what happens when you guys walk away? Well, you know, if there's some provisions in there now, the city has some teeth to go in there and say, if the buildings aren't maintained or the common areas aren't maintained and the ponds aren't maintained, there's some teeth to protect the area. I like that. Thank you for agreeing to that. I think it's a good thing you're putting the road in now, and thank you. I think that settles the fire district thing. I know it's a lot of extra money for you. I really think it'll help. move some flow. I used to live in Forest Hills where some of the residents are here today, getting in and out of there. I think when you have a four-way stop with turn lanes in there, I actually think it's gonna make it safer for the people on Archer Avenue. There's a lot of positive things that I think this development can bring, if it's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen. So, you know, thank you for putting the effort into it and sitting down and negotiating with the mayor and staff, and we appreciate it a lot, and it shows that you really want to be a partner for the community in Lockport, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. What's your pleasure, gentlemen? We have two motions to make and vote on.
First recommendation from staff is the motion to approve the special use permit for a planned industrial development subject to the approval of the development agreement. I so move.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Are those with the conditions, staff?
With conditions.
Page 5 or 6 there.
Subject, the subject.
Subject to the conditions.
A and B.
That's motion B.
No, this is motion A right now.
Right.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay.
Thank you. Motion A is just a motion to approve special use permit for a planned unit industrial development, subject to approval of the development agreement. That's motion A.
Correct.
That's, we have a motion and a second on. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Okay. The next motion.
Excuse me, before you motion?
Yes, sir.
Can I just make some clarifications on the recommendations with respect to the preliminary development plan?
If you want.
Okay. First and foremost, with condition number 1, which talked about the comments from J.J. Bennis, obviously it was confirmed that the changes to the preliminary engineering plans have been addressed, okay. However, we're still waiting on the revised traffic impact study, as well as the sediment and erosion control and best management practices wetlands memorandum needs to be addressed, as well as the stormwater management report. So I would respectfully ask that those items be submitted and be reviewed prior to the committee of the whole, which will take place in September.
Okay.
And that also, too, we add in condition number 8, that at the time of final development plan review, that the applicant does reach out to the school districts with respect to bus traffic to see if there's any additional things that they can do on Archer Avenue. And then to support Commissioner Shepard's requirement that at the time of final development plan review, that we take a look at the plant material being installed on the berms to ensure that it's a species and type that will be able to handle the conditions of being on a high dry berm. And then that we add number 10, that talks about evaluating the locations of existing trees and seeing where we can either fill in with evergreens or fill in with berming and or additional fencing. And that would be the additional ones that I would recommend adding to this list that's already there.
Should we add one more, just about looking at the additional berming that was discussed?
Yes, like the filler area.
Okay, is that what you, okay.
Yes.
I want to add one thing. For item 1. Jesus. For item 1, are we saying that all of the comments have to be addressed and approved by Benish before it goes to the committee of the whole?
Yes, that's typically what we do with committee of the whole. Now, if you look at the memos that were attached, there are some particular issues which will be addressed at final development plan review.
I saw that.
But the ones that need to be addressed now should be addressed now.
Hung up on the traffic study being approved because it drives a lot of the public improvements. I just want to make sure that, because IDOT's reviewing that too, right?
Right.
So they're going to put in their own input on if they think there's a capacity issue
Right.
with the Archer Avenue piece. So I want to make sure that that's addressed correctly and it's approved before it goes to the committee of the whole, because there's a lot of conditions attached to it, in my mind, because a 2-lane road with that many trucks is a disaster. And it's gonna be filled up with cute trucks all the time with those kids waiting for the buses, and it's just a sore thing with me. So I wanna make sure that's part of the condition of one, because it doesn't say approval of the comments at all in the step.
In the beginning, they said that
Ma'am, thank you.
was only for emergency use.
No, ma'am, that is not, that,
Going in and out off of Archer.
thank you.
Across from 147.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
Yeah.
So approval of the traffic study is included in the first piece of the motion is what I'm getting at. I understand that to be correct, because it wasn't written in here. And doesn't Will County have to approve their piece of it too?
We will review the preliminary traffic impact study and approve it before it goes to the committee of the whole.
Okay.
I can't speak to how long it'll take IDOT to review it and what IDOT comments will be. I believe that,
I know we've got, I haven't seen the comments, but I know you personally, one department's already got their review done, and we're waiting on the other. They've had these drawings since the middle of May. So we will have comments.
And has the county also reviewed it for 143rd piece?
Yeah, 143rd is, that's,
Okay.
there's no concern there.
Okay.
That whole level of services came from these, that's fine. You think about 143rd is a 5-day road.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the numbers on that, right?
I'm more concerned about Archer.
It's way over designed for the current capacity where Archer has, I think Archer has 2 or 3 times the amount of quality for usage right now, and obviously.
So the county and IDOT will finish their comments before you review it and approve it, is what I'm getting at.
I can't speak to their schedule. We're going to review that traffic impact study as soon as we get it, the revised traffic impact study.
Because, and the reason I bring IDOT in here, because the development agreement says it's driven by IDOT, not our approval. So IDOT comments have to be addressed per the agreement. That's why I don't think the approval from the city shouldn't come until after IDOT's done, because it doesn't say the Benish comments are approved for public improvements, it says IDOT comments. That's why I asked that question when I was speaking. So the first condition of the motion for approval should say after the county reviews it, after IDOT reviews it, and after the city approves it from that. That's what I'm getting at. That's I don't know if that's a legal thing or not, but it says in here that IDOT drives the improvements on Archer.
IDOT has jurisdiction.
Correct. So they should approve it before the city does, is what I'm getting at. What if there's comments by IDOT that the city doesn't look at, is what I'm getting at.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council or the
Please do.
commission, I think it would probably follow the same format that all of our development projects follow. A developer that has access to a state route must get IDOT approval. We really can't control what IDOT's going to say. There have been times when IDOT has come in with a lot of requirements, and the developer and the city may join forces and meet with IDOT to see if some of those could be pared back. There are other times where the city would concur with IDOT and require the developer to make those improvements.
That's what I'm getting at.
So I think that was my sense of your comments.
Yes.
I don't think the city would try to pare back any of the IDOT requirements. IDOT has full jurisdiction over what the turn lanes will look like, whether traffic signals will go in at Archer. I'm not talking about 143rd and the new road, but at Archer and the new road. 143rd in the new road will be controlled by Will County Department of Transportation. We've worked with them. I think some of you recall we had some issues on 143rd on the east side of 355. We were able to unravel the problems that developed there, and we now have a functioning stoplight and an open intersection, so things worked out. But I think what you're saying is the city will, let me put it this way, the city with its engineering consultant will make sure those things over which the city has control, we will have our requirements satisfied. As far as the 2 intersections, we have our requirements getting up there. The county and the state have their requirements. We're not in a position to tell that they can't require certain things, but we can certainly talk to them about any changes we think may need to be made. But at this point, we don't sense a need to have those conversations at this point. they're not going to be able to get a permit until they have their IDOT permit issued, and that will come in due time.
Actually, I'm surprised they're turning it around as fast as you said they are. Usually it takes longer than that. It could take 6 months to a year sometimes. That's good that it's only a few months that they can turn it around. So, so the first item in the motion, I guess, is per what council has said, where the city will take into consideration IDOT comments when before it goes to the committee of the whole, because that's a big void left by us that we should need to clean up before we send it back.
We're not here to clean up the legal issues.
In my opinion, that's important.
Well, it is important, but we're not here to do the legal.
As part of the motion, I'd like it in there.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I don't believe in the past that we've required the IDOT permit to be issued before the city council votes on a project. What the council will normally do is vote on a project, address all of the issues over which the city has jurisdiction, and make any further construction on the site subject to IDOT permit being issued. My recommendation would be to follow the format that we followed in the past.
That's good. Yeah, I don't want to affect the schedule with it. None of us do, so.
Okay. We're good?
So I think just for clarification, the motion is not wait until the IDOT permit is issued before the city council takes this up. City council will take this up, and I believe, Pam, it would be the first meeting in September. So that's when it would go to the city council. If the IDOT permit has not been issued, then the construction would not proceed until there's an IDOT permit that's issued.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Procedure. And
you get all that in the minutes?
Your understanding?
We're going to address that. Don't worry. We're not done with that.
Okay. So there's 10 conditions then to the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion?
Yeah, I motion to approve with the 10 conditions, yes.
I'll second.
We have a second.
Recommendation B.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Ken Shepherd?
Yes.
Scott Likens?
Absent.
Yes.
Bill Maloney?
Yes.
Dave Oxley?
Yes.
And June Lewis?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
If I could just comment regarding Archer Avenue, Route 171. Lockport has put both Will County and IDOT on notice for an extended amount of time that it needs to be widened to at least 4 lanes between New Avenue on the south and 143rd on the north. Even before this was even considered, we all knew it needed to be wider, that it was inadequate for the existing amount of traffic, let alone what's there in the future. So you should be well aware that the city of Lockport is very much in favor of getting that done. It's a matter of IDOT coming up with the funding, and you know what's going on with Springfield right now. They can't agree on the time of day, let alone the budget.
Okay, good. Any citizens to be heard? Hearing none, thank you. Under Chairman's report, we have a couple of things. Did everyone get their several-page memo from the city attorney?
That was given out at the last commission meeting, I believe. I could send another copy.
I just want to make sure everybody got it, because one of the things that came up, and it just came up again here, is the attorney under item 4, should there be a court reporter present at these hearings? And her response is, the ordinance does not require a court reporter to be present for public hearings. However, it would be prudent to have a court reporter and request a petitioner pay for that court reporter. Now, in the past, we've had a court reporter, and it was decided not to have. So I think we're back to this, that where are we going with this?
We'll take a look at presenting one or presenting a report on whether we should have one.
Okay.
Yeah. In the past, when we had a court reporter, we did not have a staff person or the clerk taking minutes. So the reporter was there essentially to take minutes, and whether it was a public hearing or not, they were just doing the whole meeting.
And the ideal is not to have the court reporter take the minutes, only the public hearing and taking the,
Right.
transcribing that hearing.
And I think, I agree with that. I think it's very important, being here
Don't we have a voice?
more years than I've been here.
Don't we have a voice?
Shepherd.
Voice recorder now.
Well, I don't know if we have a voice recorder, what do we have now?
It is voice recorded, but I can tell you that it is very laborious and difficult to actually transcribe everything
Right.
after the recording.
I said this in the beginning to the person that presented it to us, and it's just like this tonight. They're addressing stuff on the screen, our screens don't work. And sooner or later, it will become an issue that there'll be a public hearing that, oh, it didn't work. And this is what started it, 15 years ago. It didn't work. You don't have minutes to this? What do you mean? And it ended up an issue. So I totally agree with that. But that's just my opinion. Everybody else?
Get the screen's fixed. Jesus.
So secondly, the mayor has decided that, and he wants our input, he's talked with the high school about I gotta think how to term this, Pam?
A student liaison.
Student liaison, and I would assume that would come from someone junior or senior year in high school that's in the student government. I don't know how that would work with us, what they would do for planning commission other than come to the meetings, because quote unquote, they can't work on any projects with us because we don't have any projects to work on other than a meeting. I told the mayor I would pass that on and see. I mean, I certainly think it's a good idea, but I don't know how it would work. But if we have a student that wants to come on board, good for them, because if they're interested, we need to get them interested.
Most likely, they'll probably attend the meetings, and if they have time available to maybe job shadow a city staff member, but they'll add to their public service hour requirement that they need to graduate.
So we're looking at Pam and Kimberly will have helpers?
Or, I mean, just a job shadow or...
Can they do administrative stuff like making copies and putting the packets together for us?
I don't know where that would
takes
fall.
time, right?
I don't know where
it's
that would
free
fall,
labor.
but-
Why not, right?
But, okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know how that would work out, but it's something that's on the mayor's
Copies and stuff like that.
agenda, and he's looking at, but I told him I'd bring it up to everyone. I think it's a good idea, but,
How do you implement it, yeah?
okay,
Free labor.
free labor.
Free labor.
Other than that,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
done, we're good. Let's get out of here.
Aye.
Anything we missed? All right, anything we missed?
I'm glad.
Okay, this for you. I don't want to live without it. You want me to sign now?